The story of Felix Mitchell is not merely a chronicle of crime. It's a complex tapestry of ambition, community influence, and the dark evolution of the American dream within the confines of Oakland, California. Known to the world as the Cat, Mitchell was the architect of an era that redefined the narcotics trade, transforming it from a disorganized street hustle into a multi-million-dollar corporate enterprise. To understand the rise and fall of Felix Mitchell is to understand the socio-economic landscape of 1970s and 1980s Oakland, a city grappling with post-industrial decline and the arrival of a new, ruthless economy. Felix Mitchell's journey began in the San Antonio Villas, a public housing project in East Oakland. Unlike the chaotic street dealers of his time, Mitchell possessed an innate understanding of organizational structure. In the early 1970s, he founded the 69 Mob, named after 69th Avenue. This was not just a gang, it was a business. Mitchell observed the way legitimate corporations functioned, with hierarchies, specialized roles, and expansion strategies, and applied these principles to the heroin trade. The 69 Mob operated with a level of sophistication that baffled local law enforcement for years. Mitchell instituted a system of lookouts, runners, and enforcers who were often compensated better than workers in the legal sector. He was one of the first to utilize young teenagers as lookouts, knowing they would face lighter sentences if caught, a tactic that would later become a tragic standard in urban drug economies. By the late 1970s, his organization controlled a significant portion of the heroin market, not just in Oakland, but across the Bay Area and into other states. What made the 69 Mob truly unique was its administrative discipline. Mitchell reportedly kept detailed ledgers and held regular meetings to discuss territory management and revenue streams. He avoided the flashy, reckless violence associated with many of his contemporaries, preferring the quiet approach that gave his operation longevity. His nickname, the Cat, reflected his ability to navigate the shadows and slip away from legal traps. At the height of his power, Mitchell was reportedly earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. This wealth allowed him to live a life of immense luxury, yet he remained deeply embedded in the projects where he was raised. He drove expensive foreign cars and wore tailored suits, becoming a visual symbol of success in a neighborhood where traditional paths to wealth were often blocked by systemic barriers. One of the most compelling aspects of Mitchell's story is his dual identity. To the federal government, he was a merchant of death, responsible for an epidemic of addiction and the violence that inevitably follows the drug trade. To many residents of East Oakland, however, he was a benefactor. This Robin Hood persona was a calculated and perhaps genuinely felt part of his operations. During the holidays, Mitchell was known to distribute turkeys to families who couldn't afford a Thanksgiving meal. He paid for the school clothes of neighborhood children and covered the funeral costs for families who had lost loved ones. When the city's social services failed the community, Mitchell's 69 Mob often stepped in with cash. This created a shield of loyalty around him. Witnesses were often reluctant to testify against a man who provided the only financial stability they had ever known. This complicated relationship between a criminal leader and a neglected community remains one of the most studied aspects of his legacy. The reign of Felix Mitchell eventually drew the full attention of the federal government. By the early 1980s, the DEA and local task forces had made it their primary mission to dismantle the 69 Mob. The quiet era began to erode as competition from rival organizations led to increased friction on the streets. Law enforcement began to flip Mitchell's associates, slowly chipping away at the wall of silence he had built. In 1985, the law finally caught up with the Cat. He was indicted on multiple counts of conspiracy to distribute narcotics and other related charges. The trial was a media sensation in Northern California. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man who had built an empire on the misery of others, while his defense highlighted his community contributions. Ultimately, the evidence of his massive distribution network was overwhelming. Mitchell was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He was sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas, a far cry from the streets of Oakland where he was treated like royalty. Felix Mitchell's time in prison was remarkably short. In August 1986, just about a year after his conviction, the man who would survive the treacherous streets of Oakland was fatally stabbed in his cell at Leavenworth. The circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery. Some theories suggest it was a hit ordered by rivals who wanted to ensure he could never cooperate with authorities, while others believe it was a random act of prison violence. The news of his death sent shockwaves back to Oakland. Despite his criminal record, the community's reaction was one of profound mourning. The man who had been the pillar of 69th Avenue was gone, and the vacuum he left behind would soon be filled by a much more violent and fractured drug trade. If there was any doubt about Mitchell's influence, his funeral in September 1986 laid it to rest. It was one of the most extravagant and controversial events in the history of the city. Thousands of people lined the streets of Oakland to catch a glimpse of the procession. The funeral featured a 14-karat gold-plated casket, and the motorcade included over a dozen black limousines and several horse-drawn carriages. The spectacle was so grand that even Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, commented on the irony of a drug kingpin receiving a hero's farewell. For the city officials and law enforcement, the funeral was a source of embarrassment and frustration, a sign that they had lost the hearts and minds of the people to a man they considered a villain. For the mourners, it was a final tribute to the only person they felt had ever looked out for them. The era of Felix Mitchell was followed by the crack cocaine epidemic, which brought a level of violence and devastation to Oakland that Mitchell's corporate heroin model had largely avoided. Many historians and residents look back at Mitchell's time as the quiet era, not because it was peaceful, but because it was organized. Mitchell's life serves as a cautionary tale about the intersection of poverty, ambition, and the drug trade. He proved that the same skills required to run a successful legitimate corporation, organization, loyalty, and strategic planning, could be used to build a criminal empire. His legacy is a divided one. He is remembered as a predatory criminal who poisoned his own community, but also as a man who rose from the projects to become a king, providing a sense of pride and support to those the rest of the world had forgotten. Today, 69th Avenue remains a place with a long memory. The story of the cat is passed down through generations, a real-life legend of a man who climbed to the top of the world, only to find that the view from the summit was as dangerous as the streets below. Felix Mitchell did not just sell a product, he created an era, one that defined Oakland for decades and changed the face of American organized crime forever.